subject matter in terms of cryptozoology. Here you see on the book cover, there's a little smattering of everything in there. We have Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, Thunderbirds, and so forth. So, I went one too many there. How do I back up?
Sorry.
Okay. A lot of people like to romanticize cryptozoology, and they refer to me as a monster hunter. And I think that's essentially because, cryptozoology is a frontier science. The word cryptozoology actually means hidden animals. So essentially we're looking for evidence of unclassified, unverified animal species or creatures. However, a lot of these, of course, are legendary beasts that have been spoken about in different folklores and mythologies around the world for centuries. And of course, the most famous of these are Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, is very popular now, the Jersey Devil, and so forth, so Mothman. So a lot of these are kind of ingrained in popular culture, and of course we romanticize them as monsters because in many cases they do have very monstrous qualities, and are presumably if they exist, they are quite remarkable creatures. But there's a real science behind what I do, and essentially that involves going out into remote wilderness areas where there could be perhaps a habitat that would be sufficient to hide these types of creatures. So we go out, much like real zoologists, we go out in the field and we look for physical evidence, things that can be studied and analyzed and measured and classified, such as tracks and hair samples, droppings, and so forth, sign that these things are out there. Here I am in the little Central American country of Belize, which actually has two types of mystery hominids that are similar to Bigfoot, known as the Sisamite and Duende. So I've been very fortunate in my life to travel all over the world. My interest in cryptozoology and natural mystery started when I was a very young boy. And I was very fortunate growing up. Of course, I had a sort of an epiphany or a life-changing experience at a young age when I saw my first Bigfoot documentary. And like most young boys, this really was fascinating to me, the possibility that we could actually share our planet with these giant man-like beings. My mother was very adventurous and really encouraged my interest in cryptozoology, and she used to tell me about Bigfoot, the Mothman, and so forth. And she was also a travel agent, and she loved to travel around the world and would take me on these fabulous vacations. So here I am in the Amazon jungle at age 9 with a very primitive tribe known as the Yagua. And I remember getting scolded by our guide because I kept picking up tarantulas and poisonous insects and things. Because like most young boys, I thought bugs were cool and neat. And I got to swim with piranhas and all kinds of cool things. So, cryptozoology is a global phenomenon, and we have a lot of these different types of things that we investigate, and I'm going to refer to them as cryptids. That's what we refer to them in cryptozoology. Cryptids essentially means any type of unclassified or unverified creature that we're investigating or researching. And this is my partner in crime, at least on my latest book, Nick Redfern. As I mentioned, he lives in Arlington, Texas. He's actually British. He's a very well-known author, has written a number of best-selling books about UFOs, conspiracies, and cryptozoology. And Nick and I obviously shared a common interest in the monsters of Texas. We both investigated different cases, and we thought we would just kind of throw them together and write this book, which is kind of a compendium of different types of mysteries around Texas. Here Nick is holding the alleged skull of a Chupacabra, and that's something we're going to talk about here as far as the Texas version of the Chupacabra here in a second. Well, we're going to start with I think everyone's favorite is Bigfoot, right? Who doesn't love Bigfoot and the whole mystery behind that? Most people know of Bigfoot and Sasquatch, mostly from the Pacific Northwest. Of course, a lot of reports from Washington State, California, Oregon, and British Columbia, and so forth, Alaska. However, surprisingly, we have a number of Bigfoot reports and sightings that are documented throughout the United States, and actually it's a global phenomenon. There are versions of Bigfoot or Bigfoot-type creatures that are reported around the world. Now, it might interest you to know that Oklahoma and Texas Both states rank in the top 10 states as far as the number of reports annually. I believe Texas is at number 8 and maybe Oklahoma is number 9 or something like that. But both states produce a good number of Bigfoot reports and activities. And from my own personal experiences, I've done a lot of research in both areas. And I also, of course, I'm contacted by a lot of people that have had experiences and reports and things that they can't explain. So whatever these things are, we seem to have something, some type of mystery hominid or primate that lives in Texas and Oklahoma. The history of creatures like Bigfoot dates back to the 1800s. In fact, in the 1830s, we find a very famous legend in Texas known as the Wild Man of the Navidad. And there was actually a settlement down on the lower Navidad River, which is in southeast Texas. And people in that area began to find these mysterious human-like footprints on the sandbars. And subsequently, they began to have sightings of these creatures that were very human-like, but apparently covered in hair. And of course, at that time, in the 1800s, the notion or the name Bigfoot and Sasquatch did not exist yet. So at that time, people referred to these creatures as wild men. And we can even go back further into, for example, European mythology, where we have beings known as wild men or sometimes as the green man. And you know, these were essentially, the descriptions were very similar to what we think of in terms of modern Bigfoot. That is, human-like creature walking on 2 legs like us, but completely covered in hair and fur. And of course, in terms of Bigfoot, something that's very massive and bulky, typically standing 6 to 9 feet tall, very muscular, broad shoulders, long arms, and so forth. So anyways, there was a famous legend about the Wild Man of the Navidad, and just recently some film students in Texas actually produced an independent movie based on the original events, and they actually had access to some of the original archives and documents that talked about these encounters with the Wild Man of the Navidad. Oklahoma has a wild man too, in fact. The town of Lawton, Oklahoma, there's a report from the 1970s that refers to a Bigfoot creature that was running around wearing pants, which I think is kind of weird and creepy. You know, there's a theory out there that perhaps it was just a homeless person or some type of crazy man running out in the woods, but you know, that's not too common. We don't hear Bigfoot wearing pants too often. But again, the name Wild Man, I guess my point here is that the name Wild Man is interchangeable with Bigfoot, and that's something in other parts of the world and in other cultures and history that we might find. The most famous Bigfoot flap in Texas is that of the Lake Worth Monster. And this took place just outside of Fort Worth, Texas, back in 1969, in fact. What happened was in July of that year, there were 2 couples parked out by the lake in kind of a Lover's Lake area, and they claimed that this hairy, what they initially described as a scaly goat man, jumped on the hood of their car and actually tried to abduct one of the women out of the car. And the 2 couples raced to the police station and filed a report, and made the local Fort Worth newspaper the next morning. And coincidentally, the article was written by Jim Mars, who's actually a very well-known UFO writer these days. The next night, after people had read the article, there were scores of people down by the lake sort of doing a monster hunt, looking around and trying to get a glimpse of this monster. And lo and behold, about 30 or 40 eyewitnesses saw this, what they described as a giant white ape-like creature on 2 legs, ambling around near the woods. And it actually climbed up on a little cliff, and apparently it picked up a spare tire, according to the eyewitnesses, and hurled it at the crowd, which caused everyone to disperse and jump in their cars. And in fact, there were a couple of sheriff's officers there as well, and they got scared too and jumped in their cars and drove off. So that's pretty notable because we have a Bigfoot report that involves about 30 or 40 eyewitnesses. So to me that's pretty compelling circumstantial evidence, even though it is only an eyewitness report. But when you have that many people there at the same time.